Hello everyone, I'm Santiago, and today I'm gonna be testing the Ryzen 5 2400G versus the GT 1030. This will be a side-by-side comparison. So first of all, this is a GPU comparison, so I'm just comparing the GPU inside the 2400G, which is a Vega 11 GPU, against the GT 1030. So on the CPU side, on the 2400G, I just kept the frequency at 3.8 GHz across the whole video, and I'll use the 2400G as the CPU for the GT 1030 as well. So the CPU is the same across the whole video. We are getting 2400G as CPU at 3.8 GHz. So you will see a comparison of the internal GPU of the 2400G with the RAM at 2133 MHz versus the same with RAM at 3000 MHz. Then that against the 2400G with the GPU overclocked to 1550 MHz and the RAM at 3000 MHz once again, and then all that will be against the GT 1030 with the 2400G as the CPU. So the internal GPU there is not being used, only the GT 1030 as GPU, the 2400G as CPU. I had a ton of issues with the 2400G. I had blue screens, crashes, high temperatures. So well, first of all, about the blue screens and crashes, it seems that it was a problem on my end. With my two ASRock motherboards I had a problem, so I went and bought an ASUS motherboard and the problems were sorted out. So right now if you want to buy this APU, I'll wait for more BIOS updates for the actual motherboards. I'm sure in around a month or two from now this should be completely sorted out and you shouldn't have any of the problems I faced. And I also noticed very high temperatures. That's because the CPU was boosting itself to 3.9 GHz without me doing anything, and while doing so it was boosting the voltage to 1.5 volts, which is very high. So with the stock cooler it was reaching like 100 degrees Celsius. So what I did here was to just keep the CPU running at 3.8 GHz with the voltage at 1.325 volts, and that was enough to maintain decent temperatures. I would say you'll see that the temperatures aren't that bad in the video, but if you're doing a stress test of both the CPU and GPU of the 2400G, you can go up to 90 degrees Celsius with the stock cooler. So I would recommend an aftermarket cooler for this APU. And as you'll see in the video, the RAM frequency is very important on this APU because the internal GPU of the 2400G doesn't have onboard memory. It uses your RAM, so the frequency there is very important on the RAM. And also the RAM is on dual channel. That's very important as well. It makes a huge difference in performance. So if you're going to buy an APU, make sure that the RAM frequency is high and you're using dual channel. And I'm using 8 GB of RAM, so the APU is taking like 2 GB from my system memory. So I end up with around 6 GB of RAM. Some games will have some trouble with 6 GB of RAM from the system. So I recommend having 16 GB of RAM if possible with this APU, so you have 14 GB available for the rest of the system. But yeah, I was very impressed with the performance of this chip. It was actually very close to the GT 1030, and sometimes it beats the GT 1030 depending on the game, because some games run better on AMD, some others on NVIDIA. But this will only get better because we still have more driver updates for the internal GPU. So yeah, in conclusion, I'm quite impressed. And prices vary between regions, so I'm not going to tell you which one to buy, but in my opinion I will just go for the 2400G once the BIOS updates on some motherboards is sorted out, because for that price you get a similar GPU to the GT 1030, but you get a very good CPU. 4 cores, 8 threads, it can boost up to 3.9 GHz. So what you don't spend on the GPU, you'll spend it on your RAM and on an aftermarket cooler, and later on you can put a dedicated GPU. For example, when the prices go down, you might want to get a GTX 1060 or something like that. You had a good enough CPU to put there. So that's pretty much what I think about this. But yeah guys, that's pretty much it. I hope you keep enjoying the video. Thanks for watching and see you next time.
to look beautiful. Hairstyles from across the common.
Move along.
Why buy just an ordinary piece of wood? A swatter is a
The hub of trade
custom-made
for
piece
all
of
Diamond City right here.
hickory.
Prescriptions filled. High quality chems.
Nothing to see here.
Yoga's for chavalas. I'd rather hit the weights any day.
Hi, Daddy.
It's like 12 inches hanging right here.
Dispatch, engaging the suspect.
Wow, had made a girl swoon during the recession. Oh, perfect.
If you'll excuse me, Congressman. Urgent matter. Do you enjoy your evening? Got it.
God, no. Have sex go right now. Remember to lick your teeth. We don't want any lipstick there, do we? It'll make you look like unkempt sluts.
Sector of Western Europe.
You, head down to the old radio. Get the generator working. We need to get one last transmission out, and let the other settlements know what's coming. I'll do what I can.
I need more wood for the fire.
They needed most of the lumber to repair the guard towers. We'll have to make do with what we have.
Well, if they need arrowheads for the battle, then I need to set the
Lara, I'm sorry if Sophia was less than welcoming.
I understand. I'm just glad you were there to vouch for me.
My people have spent decades fighting outsiders. It's not an easy habit to break. See if you can lend a hand with the preparations. A little hard work would go a long way towards building trust.
I'll see what I can do.
They will likely come from the air.
From now on, assume your every move's observed.
Fall on your knees before the eternal fire!
Officer, taking a rest from witch hunting. Greetings, Your Honor. Good to see you.
Our world will burn! Burn in the eternal fire!
Bet you're sweaty in all that armor.
What you care?
Wouldn't you rather sweat on me?
How are we to fight a pestilence? Take it easy.
Land where I might